Welcome all, small and all, with money to waste and much more time as well. I used to be big into World of Warcraft back in the day, way bigger than I am right now. It was my life and soul, but granted, World of Warcraft was something important to me back then. And I've been there and I've seen how World of Warcraft became worse and worse and worse with each passing year. And I would say the end of Legion and the start of Battle for Azeroth is what really put a pin, a powerful nail in there. And Battle for Azeroth was decent and had its parts, but it was the beginning of the ending, because then the franchise came into the hands of a man that is probably the worst thing that could have happened to World of Warcraft ever, Danuser. And the less we say about him, the better, mostly because YouTube will not like me and all the words I have to say regarding Danuser and his affinity for Sylvanas. But after that, you'd think he would have the time to save his image with another expansion, and that was Dragonflight, another abortion of an expansion if I'm being honest with you. And here we are now with The War Within. And The War Within is something very interesting because it's better than Dragonflight and Shadowlands, but we have to understand that the bar was low to begin with. The bar was so low I could start digging a hole from Romania all the way to China, and I still probably won't reach that bar. That's how low it is. The pits of hell are not low enough when it comes to the bar and how low it is. And you would think that maybe there was only one way, and that's up. But don't get me wrong. The War Within is better than what was before it. But there are elements to it. Oh boy, those elements speak very badly of it. Let's begin with the leveling experience. The leveling experience is interesting, and if you have no other characters that are max level, you will be starting without the warband bonus, which means your experience will probably end at 76, 78, which is horrible. The whole leveling campaign won't bring you to the max level, and that means you're gonna have to do a few missions here and there. Now, it might seem interesting and nice to have the possibility to do that, especially when you consider that maybe max level should be a reward of itself and not this chore that you have to do and to get to the good part of the game, you know, to get to the real game. Now the game begins. That's understandable. This is an understandable philosophy at the end of the day. The problem is that Warcraft is past that point. At this point, you're not putting the genie back in the bottle. People are used to speed, and the name of the game is speed. As fast as possible, as fast as you can, and hopefully you can a lot, because boy is Warcraft now more a game about speed than it is about slow and rewarding interactions and objectives. And this didn't change in The War Within. Of course, you can blame Blizzard that they are responsible for this. They created this environment and this meta where everything has to be very fast. But the player base also takes blame for it. But that's irrelevant, to be honest, because the campaign stops at a bad point and you can't blame the player base for that. You can't blame them for not reaching level 80 when they have no level 80 character beforehand to give a 5% boost. And you know, that boost adds up into like 25% boost. Add in, what was it again? The war mode thing, and it's probably good. It's like what, 35% boost to your experience gains. Now that's decent, but that requires you do the campaign again or spam dungeons until you feel like pulling your eyes out, because that certainly is how I felt when I had to do that on my fourth alt. And yeah, to get that 25%, you have to do a lot of things that are annoying. But it is what it is. You can live with that. The problem is when we get to the meat and bone of the expansion, the story. And as I said, the story is better than Shadowlands and Dragonflight. Again, the bar is low to begin with, but it's not perfect. It's not there. But I'll start with something that's good. First of all, the Earthen are introduced and the world is built around them. The world building of the Earthen is interesting, it's fascinating. You look at how they function as a society, their roles, their council, and honestly, there hasn't been a race that well introduced since the Pandaria. Now, we could talk about the Magar, but the Magar weren't really introduced as a race you could play. Neither were the Lightforged Draenor, the Void Elves either. These were just things that were there, periphery or maybe main players in a certain expansion, but not things that, you know, the world is built around them, like the Earthen and like the Pandaren. Not even the Draktyr, and they've tried with the Draktyr, but again, Dragonflight was an abortion of an expansion, so they failed with that. Tragic. And the only thing I can think of that kinda gets close to this is the Mecha Gnomes from No More Gone, but those suffer from the problem of them being introduced this expansion, this certain zone of them, and then they get introduced into the faction. And it's the same thing they did with the Lightforged and the Void Elves at the end of the day, which isn't that smart. We can look at the Kultiran and the Zandalari, which have been big players in the whole Battle for Azeroth expansion, but overall, they might as well just be reskinned trolls and humans, and I think it would have been better if you had Kultiran options and Zandalari options rather than making a new race for them. Nevertheless, there's no race that can beat the Earthen in world building. No expansion race like it since the Pandaren, and it's been a while if you think about it. It's been a lot of time since the Pandaren, and a part of this you can probably say it's thanks to Metzen, because Metzen is back in leadership now. He has the reins of the story, and we can probably get a good story like we did before. But here is now where I have to talk about the bad parts of the story. Now, there is no secret that World of Warcraft is infested with diversity, inclusion, and equity. World of Warcraft has many woke elements, from the body types to the race change, the humans in Stormwind, which is quite again a funny story, and so on. So it is to no one's surprise that the men are either incompetent or evil. Because let's look at the Earthen, best story, allied race, whatever, since the Pandaren, and here's what happens. Their council is formed out of 4 members. Each one is responsible for a certain aspect of Earthen society, and here's the problem: 2 of them are gone. One of them is stuck in his hole in the Ringing Depths, a new zone added in the expansion, and another one just decided to say, screw you guys, I'm going home. I'm making my own casino with blackjack and hookers. And so she went to make her own thing where they can fight against the directive of the Titans and still try to be good Earthen. As you can imagine, the other speaker, the one that's in the Ringing Depths, that guy just turned evil. So that guy has to get replaced by one of the archivists that we meet earlier in the questline in the Isle of Dorn, and of course that's Tite, who is an Earthen woman with some claws that are reminiscent of Dr. Octopus. Yada yada, story progresses, and she becomes the speaker chosen by the Earthen in the Ringing Depths. So we have evil man gets replaced by powerful women. Now we can look at the first story that happens before the Ringing Depths, still on the Isle of Dorn, and that's with the Earthen that decided to take its toys and go home. And we have to get her back into the council with the help of this Earthen dude that's a leader of the Storm Riders, and they ride Storm Griffins, and they're cool and all, but they disagree. This rider and this other Earthen disagree because of their edicts and whatever, and how the riders are supposed to protect everybody, but they're not doing their job, whatever. Fast forward, as you can pretty much imagine, we bring the lost wayward Earthen back into the fold, back to the council, and next we move to deal with the Nerubians, who are the enemies of this expansion, and guess what happens? The Storm Rider dude has to sacrifice himself to save us and somebody else, and so on. He's dead now. His Stormrook is just flying around, just leaving us. Dude's dead. Later on in the main campaign, we get allies from the Eastern Kingdoms and Kalimdor, and one story that deals with Thrall, by the way, we'll get to Thrall soon enough, is to get back the Stormrooks, and you get the Stormrooks back, and you get Storm Riders, and who will take this Storm Rider dudes from the beginning spot? Well, of course, this lady that managed to save this Stormrook and decide that no, they are friends, and they choose to bond with us, and blah blah blah. Again, man replaced by powerful women, whatever. And so the council now stands at a weird gender balance of 3-1. But by the way things are looking, that will probably change and just be like 4 women ruling. So again, the woke virus still there, and it makes sense that's with Metzen, because Metzen probably changed a lot, probably became more liberal, unfortunately. But let's go back to the Warcraft story, because that's what's important. I said that we'll get back to Thrall, and here's the problem with Thrall. There's too little of him. Now, some people might be repulsed by Thrall. They might still remember the times when the Horde was the main player of expansions of World of Warcraft, and they still kept that thing going. You look at Shadowlands and it's a little bit more of a Horde expansion, despite trying to be neutral, and that's all thanks to Sylvanas, and we can blame Dan User for that. Battle for Azeroth tends a lot in the Horde's favor, way more so than it should be. Dragonflight adds a little bit more neutral, but then it becomes more alliance-centric because it deals with the Night Elves and reclaiming their home, which, by the way, it makes sense that that would happen because the Horde kinda won a big part of Battle for Azeroth, while the Alliance won nothing, and you can't have that in a 2-faction system, but I've already talked about that once. And so people are kind of tired about the Horde being like the main players in every expansion. The problem is that now, they're not really there at all. Most of the story is focused on Anduin, on Deliria, on Moira Torsian and her son, that dork Dagrant Torsian, and you get even Magni Bronzebeard. We'll get to him at a later point in this video. And the issue is that that's it. Those are the characters you deal with. All Alliance characters. I understand. I kind of like the focus being more on Alliance characters because the Earthen are basically Earth dwarves, and they should focus more on the Alliance side. Again, I don't think the Earthen should have been an allied race for the Horde, but that's a different issue. And it makes sense. The problem is that once the reinforcements come, you get Thrall, and he does play a bigger part. I'm gonna be honest with you, he does play a bigger part in the story, but he plays almost exactly the same part as Jaina, which is little and insignificant. Understandable, the story is more focused on Illyria and Anduin, so characters like Thrall and Jaina don't really get to shine that much, and that makes sense, and it will probably get rectified in another patch. But here's the thing, you can't have this constant flux of factions. The idea and the biggest problem that Battle for Azeroth had was that one faction won too much against the other. The Horde got to burn Teldrassil, and they got to go, if I can have it, you can't, with the Undercity. The Alliance didn't get to do anything. They didn't get any major victory. Moral victory, sure, but that doesn't really matter in a war, does it? And now they're trying to fix this issue when it comes to the balance of power between the factions and have this one way more in the Alliance side. And it's understandable, especially after the Horde was the main player and the star player for so many expansions. But you have to balance things out properly, and I think they will do it because during some extra missions, some side missions, you get a reference to the Undermine, and the Undermine is the perfect place to have a Goblin zone and a Goblin raid. And guess what that means? The Goblins get their chance to shine, and that means it's gonna be a little bit more Horde focused, and hopefully so with Glasgow and other Horde characters in there. Of course, with certain Alliance characters, it shouldn't be Anduin and Illyria though. It shouldn't be Anduin and Illyria. And I say this because the main campaign of the first patch deals with Anduin and Illyria. Anduin crying about losing his light and then finding it at the end of the story. Spoiler alert, I guess. Illyria hunting for Zaltat and then understanding that she should rely and trust Turalion, which is her husband, which is normal. So, good job, Illyria. You got this lesson. Good for you. And I think for this next patch, if it's the Undermine, they should be left outside of our main concern. Let's deal with the more horde-focused thing and have a few characters appear here from the Alliance. Jaina's always a good option to bring. But I think that's enough about speculations and a way to balance the storyline for both factions. I think it's time to look at Magni's story. And Magni's story is pretty interesting. Moira doesn't like him, continues to not like him. Dagran likes his grandfather, his grandpappy, Granda, as he calls him, so it makes sense. And something interesting happens with Magni. Magni sacrifices his whatever force thing he has there, whatever he's made of diamonds, to remake the earthen making machine, which means the earthen can repopulate. The earthen don't really populate like the other races can, which is a little bit strange. But hey, he's back in flesh and blood, and I like that. That's pretty interesting aspect, having Magni back in his normal form, which granted the dude earned his rest. But that's not why I'm here, because this doesn't really focus on Magni that much. It focuses on Moira Tarsian. Moira. There is this side mission where you have to go with Moira and recover this hammer of the Bronzebeards, ancient artifact of the Bronzebeard since the War of the Three Beards or whatever. And the story there isn't that big to get it. It's a little bit stupid. An earthen tries to steal the hammer, but the hammer has a will of its own, and if he doesn't like the guy holding it, he will fight back, referring to the hammer. So the earthen steals it, we go back, we get it, and Moira tries to give it back to her father, but she kinda wants it, and so Magni just decides, yeah, you can have it. And it's a nice sign, because at the end of the day, you know the hammer's going to Dagran, and I like the way this line is made for Dagran. Dagran is a dork, but Dagran represents exactly the alliance and unity of the three dwarven clans, and the proper evolution, for it to not just be the Bronzebeards and the Dark Irons. Which again, the Dark Irons should have been customization options, not a whole different race, but that's a different story. And I can't really avoid it, I have to talk about this. Since this first patch is basically the story of Valeria and Anduin, how is it? Because it focuses on them mostly, and I would say it's interesting. Anduin really is insufferable at moments, very much so. The reason why he's insufferable is kind of stupid when you remember Shadowlands, but it works in a way. It's kind of strange that it does. Like, imagine this, Anduin has no balls during the whole expansion. No balls, Anduin. He's just crying and moaning and everything and whining around. But the more the expansion goes on, he's starting to get them back a little. So that's pretty much good for him. But Illyria suffers an interesting story, because I think Illyria's like the main character here. Which, oh, another Windrunner sister is the main character of an expansion. Oh boy, I wonder if we're gonna get sick of her like we did with Sylvanas. Depends on who's writing and how fetishistic he is about his elves. But that story aside, Illyria works in an interesting way. She can see the void, she can use the void. Turalyon doesn't trust the void, but he trusts her. And the whole story just ignores Turalyon for the most part and just focuses on Illyria and how she's so out there for the hunt. And she's desperate to get Zalatal to the point where she messes things up and puts in jeopardy her king, because that's what Anduin is, her king, and herself, and including you, the player character. And it's interesting because the whole expansion is the flaws of Illyria, the growth of Illyria, and the redemption of Illyria. And it's made to work in one single patch, which is incredible. Illyria's story by itself, if we ignore the lesbian spiders, the earthen and whatever else, her story is perfect. It's exactly what it should be. It's the story that many other characters don't really have, and they should have it, but they don't. But Illyria gets it, and in my opinion, that's perfect. So at that point, they really did something good with her story. You end up saving Khadgar. Khadgar doesn't die if you... Well, no, you know. But he's now in a wheelchair, and that plays back to the whole woke and die initiatives, whatever. We're used to it as World of Warcraft. You have body type 1 and 2 instead of male and female. Yeah. That aside, there is a conversation between Illyria and Khadgar after Illyria saves Khadgar and Anduin gets back his light, where they talk about this chair and how he survived and how he prefers this chair because Modara made it for him. And it's an interesting reference to Legion and this whole budding romance between these two ancient wizards, which I like. I think it's nice. That's pretty cool. Oh yeah, introduce the lesbian spider stings, whatever, to the woke initiative, blah blah blah, who cares. People can play the game for free by just getting gold. Back to the review. I know I didn't talk about the Nerubians and how they're good Nerubians now because they're not undead, they're normal spider people, which is weird, but and then you have like the Void turning spider people into humanoid spider people, which act nothing like they used to before the transformation, before their ascension, but that's because the Void corrupts, as we all well know. I didn't talk about the Ringing Depths that much, which you also have kobolds that are trying to be friendly, and well, they're not trying to befriend some kobolds, and it's the same thing with the gnolls and Dragonflight. They just try to make all the bad races you had to kill in Classic as friendly, I guess because nothing can be an enemy anymore or evil, but nevertheless I digress about that one. The Arotar Empire or the Hallowfall region and the half humanoid, half elves, let's just call them half-elves, that you meet there that are obsessed with the light are an interesting faction. The zone is very pretty. Best looking zone, in fact, in my opinion, this whole expansion. And there is something interesting there, but World of Warcraft has this tendency of stealing ideas from Warhammer or other places. Look at Sir Denatrius. That is an Elric ripoff. There's no doubt about it. They went with it. The elf-like look, the albino thing, the white hair, everything. The sword, that's kind of crazy. That's just Elric. They just copy stuff and don't even have the good grace to say, yes, we are Elric fans. We did copy Elric for our biggest character ever, Artis, and this random schmuck. And this time around, they're doing this copying thing from Warhammer, it seems. And here's the thing, I can't prove it. It's not like the Arotar guys that you meet are that copy, but by all implications, what they are a copy of, it sounds like it's more a mixture of the Imperium from 40k with the Empire from Fantasy and some elements from the Stormcast from Age of Sigmar. It creates a weird mixture that, okay, fine, it's interesting, but it's so dubious that it's clear that it's a Warhammer inspiration. Now the question is which one they're gonna tend more into, because by taking from all three of these, they can go either way. They can go the Imperium way, which is going to end up all fascismus and whatever. They're not gonna have any clue what to do with it. They're just gonna make a parody of what they think the Imperium is. They're gonna go the Empire way with it, which is going to be funny because they're half elves. Again, not really a problem there, but if they go the Empire route from Warhammer Fantasy, it gets a little bit boring-ish, I would say, because it's kind of generic a little, whatever. If they go the Age of Sigmar route, then God have mercy on our souls, because they're gonna be so Mary Sue, there'll be no reason to do that part of the story or care about it. So this blatant ripoff of Warhammer, whichever one they were gonna go with, is interesting, and it really captivates me because they can go a bunch of ways. And again, I just hope they don't go the Imperium route because they have no idea what the Imperium is. Most Warcraft fans and a bunch of tourists, Warcraft tourists and Warhammer tourists have no idea what the Imperium is, and they just present it as Mufascismus, which is wrong. It might go, again, if they go fantasy, it's gonna be too generic and it's gonna be way too close to Stormwind in a way if you think about it. But I guess a little bit more. We're worshipping this thing. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm really curious where they will go with it. It just remains to be seen at the end of the day. So that's interesting. The Nerubians are again interesting. Overall, there is potential in this expansion, I would say. There is a lot of potential in this expansion to do a bunch of stuff with it, but we can't ignore the die elements in it. They won't go away, and so the expansion will suffer. We'll see more strong women replacing men, and again, as I feared during Shadowlands, or was it Dragonflight, where I said they plan to replace legacy characters with women. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. But again, it's an interesting aspect. Overall, I would say this is an expansion that if you have the goal to buy a token so you can afford the monthly subscription, go for it. I say it's decent enough that it deserves to be played, and it deserves to be played as it is here rather than on a private server that will have it messed up and you won't really get to experience it all. So it deserves to be played on retail while you spend as little as possible. It's not like Shadowlands or Dragonflight where you can just play them on a private server and it's just gonna mean just as much. So yeah, this one is worth it, but with the minimal investment possible. Grading it, I don't know, 6. Probably would have been 6.5 without the die elements in it. No, it probably would have been higher, but whatever. 6. Just, it's decent and it's better than whatever was before it. It's not Wrath of the Lich King, it's not Legion, hell, it's not Mist of Pandaria or Cataclysm, or even Warlords of Draenor. It's not that good where it's worth it to buy the digital deluxe get screwed out of your money thing. But it's decent enough to just buy it as low as possible and just use your gold for tokens. That's really about it. Not great, not as bad as it could be. Anyway, gonna have to shield for myself now at the end. If you managed to reach this point, please like, comment, subscribe, rate, whatever, share. Helps the channel grow, and that's about it. Thanks for watching.